Yeah, they might be, say for example, morning they want president, then shift the other to another room and all that, another Zoom
Ah,
session. That is the logistic problem lah.
I see, I see, I see. Very interesting. Huh? It still got room to this thing. All these are virtual, isn't it? Even the
Yes,
name, the name actually non-existent, but
yes.
Sally,
Yes.
by the way, you know about the background, how far is it? Sometimes like people's face appear. So like at the back, how far back you should have your chair, for example.
Uh, the question, I think that one is dependent on where your camera is. The closer you are to the
Oh,
camera, the bigger your face would look like.
because I saw suddenly sometimes people's head coming out. Yeah, so that's why I never use the background. I don't know how to use. No, say I don't know how to use. It actually sometimes it describe your this thing. Especially people like me, no hair already. Lagi dalam. Tak dalam.
Your camera is quite far away,
You
Architect
think
Wei, I
so?
think. Yeah,
I think
but it's
maybe I
okay.
just move
Yeah.
myself closer. Good.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Because actually this is like what do you call?
Ah,
Yeah. That's better.
yes. I think we're about to start now.
Sure.
Okay. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon session of this year's PAM CPD for Unlimited from PAM, yeah. And we have with here today our very honorable speaker, architect Wooi Lok Kuang, and she is going to be presenting a paper entitled "The Impact of the Pandemic and Rediscovery of Equatorial Architecture." So first and foremost, hi, Architect Wei.
Hi,
You're doing
Sally.
well? Yes, yes.
Okay. Try to keep well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Old Sifu here. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but let me just introduce a bit about Architect Wei. He is the principal of Wei Architect, which he established in the year 1996. He was born in the northern regions of Malaysia, where he spent his childhood among traditional Malay villages. The authentic and sustainable way of his life in the villages has greatly influenced his outlook on architecture. He spent 10 years in Sydney, Australia, and obtained a Bachelor of Architecture in 1989 and subsequently a Masters of Architecture in 1990 from the University of New South Wales. Apart from his practice, he was regularly involved in architectural education as a speaker, mentor, external reviewer, external examiner, as well as an industry advisor to local universities. Hence, my nomenclature for him, Sifu, yeah. He was appointed as an adjunct professor at University Putra, Malaysia from 2008 to 2015. His work is recognized by Malaysia Institute of Architects, SPAM, and Architects Regional Council Asia, ArcAsia, for excellence in architecture and published both locally and internationally. So please do welcome Architect Wei. And without further ado, Architect Wei, I think I would like to invite you to share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally.
Yeah,
Um, let me maybe I start the slides first. Yeah.
yeah. While you're doing that, I would like to uh, remind all the participants, please do ask questions via the Q&A tab in your Zoom app. Yeah, there's a Q&A tab where you can ask questions. Please do ask there, and I will moderate the questions accordingly. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Sally. I think what I'll do, I'll start. Um, good. Now it's good afternoon after lunch. Yeah. Well, one thing good about convenient about being Zoom that even when you're sleeping, nobody get embarrassed. So do whatever you want to do. Um, thank you, Pam, for inviting me to talk about to talk to all of you. Today, I think the session for me is that it's not so much of like I try to postulate or to tell you what things are, because this is like a COVID-19 period that everyone talking about the same thing, and you'll get a bit boring. But let me qualify that a little bit and to maybe talk about what is to come in this not I hope that it's not too boring a talk, but it's more like I would say more of like for me to share some experience, and also that during this COVID period, and also I think more on like that hopefully after this you might be either provoked or you feel that there are certain things that you want to say. Please do that. because it's not a session that I'm going to tell you what it is. Now, how I'm going to do this is that I will talk about the impact. Actually, it's not effect, but the impact of pandemic. Not in the sense of like, I think there are many other speakers that in this space now that actually talk about practice, how it impact the practice, how it impact the actually construction side and all this. No, I'll be more focused on how it affects us in terms of how we look at our own design, right? And then whether is it something wrong with our design so far that it seems to be like certain type that we take it for granted, like offices and shopping center, seems to like not doing very well in this pandemic because it's like enclosed space. And like, for example, in Singapore, when they open up the school, the first thing they do is to shut down all the aircon and open the window to have a natural airflow to go through. Because I think this pandemic, it is very not only contagious, but it's also infectious, and like it can pass on by droplets and things like that. So somehow ventilation, natural ventilation like that, sort of reduce the risk of transmission. But in any case, that's probably a first part, not going to be too scientific, but it's like you probably, some of you know better than me in terms of like in terms of like this issue. So the second part is that I would talk about, touch on like, so having known all this impact on us, what can we do, or is there something that we need to look at closely to to handle this? I know the vaccine now seems to be now on the way to be impact, and then people being people, we have short memory. Eventually, hopefully, all this will be a thing of a past. But I think because of the impact, like now affect us, uh, like lockdown. I think 2 more weeks will be a year. So this impact, prolonged impact, I suspect there's going to impact on us for a long time to come, and definitely we don't want that to be recurring. And the final part, being a practitioner architect, I don't believe that I will keep telling you about what to do. What I do is that I will illustrate some of this point, that I relook at what I've done. I use 5 projects. They're all houses. Like how do they, that certain thing that I do that I think I will continue doing, and certain feature that I have in my design that I feel a bit vindicated, that is the right approach, so to speak. And also like maybe there are other things that I need to relook at, even in this bungalow typology, which is quite a specific typology, but it's quite a common typology among the architects. So if you are um, a student, then you just treat this as a idea that some old architect telling you how we see the situation here now from our perspective. And for my peers and colleagues, well, just treat this like just a session of exchanging ideas. And for the public, um, if any one of you actually in the space, just if you feel that certain things that I say that you cannot relate to, please do ask question. And I don't think my talk is going to last for an hour, but it probably less, hopefully. Um, so let me get on with it. The impact of pandemic. I think the first thing that we look at immediately is there a precedent before this pandemic? And to me, I think the one precedent that everyone seems to refer to is actually 1918, the Spanish flu, but actually it started in America. Why is it Spanish flu? I know, I don't know, but it's actually it's like impacted not only in America but in the world quite widely. I think about 2 million people die or something like that. But because of maybe they don't have an internet and things like that. But I understand even as far as Australia, they're affected very badly through some archive that I managed to look at. But what it means is that it somehow is a flu virus, and subsequent to that is very interesting. And then for us architects, definitely we know who Le Corbusier is. And Le Corbusier during 1918, he's like in his 30s, whereas like the other one, like Scandinavian architects that very well known, Aalto, he's in his 20s. And subsequent to that, the Le Corbusier came out with a lot of these we call white villas, like Villa Savoie, Villa La Roche, urban area or even outskirt area. But the one feature that he has, first, is painted white. And for some reason, I think it's reflected that they suddenly realized that the place being hygienic is very important. And then the other more important feature is actually terraces, roof terraces or large terraces outside, so that the occupants can go and enjoy fresh air. That's one thing. And then also sunlight. Because sunlight is widely accepted as almost like a natural sanitizer, that to kill the viruses naturally. And also Awalto in his later work, no, say later work, is during that period after like when he more established, he designed a lot of sanatorium. Sanatorium, like again, the key feature is that they build it on probably closer to the outskirts, and the whole intention is also to expose, to allow the occupants to go out, like if any disease or whatever seems to go out to nature, like to get fresh air and sunlight and things like that. And to me, I think it's sort of like signified, like those times they become like quite a important building type that European are looking at during those time. So it seems that is this always crisis that get us to look at architecture in a different light, right? And then also, I think it shows the resilience on us as people. I mean, Malaysia or otherwise, or globally or whatever. Although I mean, there's a lot of sacrifice, like in Italy, early days that we saw, all the people die without the loved one next to them. Is very heart wrenching, and even currently. But Malaysia seems to wear off quite well. Although I mean, now the situation is still quite dire in a way, because the virus seems to be already in the community. But nevertheless, a certain resilience. It shows a certain resilience of people over this pandemic. And I say that in a way that I feel that because maybe like from my perspective, I'm like, we are not young, but we probably went through enough. I still remember that I was drawing a poster for dengue, for anti-Aedes, what is sort of like propaganda or whatever, back in like 45 years ago, I would imagine, right? Like 40 odd years ago. And then dengue is still with us. And then we still have our Nyamok Aedes, the Aedes mosquito, right? And AIDS, we don't really have a cure as such, but there are treatment. So it seems to me that when we can't like handle the screen, we cannot handle the disease, but we sort of like tend to live with it. So there's so certain resilience. But somehow I think this COVID-19 is like so prolonged that we expect that it's only a few months, it go on to stretch out to now it's like nearly a year. So it's definitely, I think, it will imprint in our mind, I gather, that we will try to avoid this from recurring in the near future. So I think that the psychological impact probably would be with us. And then for us, architect and designer, that would be, or even a student, like this would be something I think pertinent to think about. And the third one, I would imagine that I think this is the first thing that I thought about. I said, how come why the lockdown? And mainly, I think it is a lot of time is because I think, the lockdown is due to the fact that how should I say it, that we don't, um, what do you call, we don't like learn from it. Like one key thing, like for example, why people cannot go to work, right? And I would say that actually there's a smart move to lockdown. I mean, given that for one thing, it's not it's architecture, but it's more probably on M&E, like the air conditioning, the centralized aircon. I still remember when I was a student in Australia in 1984 or something, there was a disease they call Legionnaire disease, like if you, it's also pass through air and things like that, and then a lot of people die, although that's not like seen as a pandemic worldwide. Like the aircon, the problem with air conditioning system, if we architect, we know they have a cooling tower and chiller pump normally on the roof, but every floor they would have an air handling unit that distributed all the cold air to every floor. I mean, every room would have an outlet, right? If it's centralized, and the air handling unit only emitted like probably about probably about like how should I say it, about 5% of a fresh air, 5% of the fresh air that we come in. So it actually doesn't help. Like for example, if someone in the room have that disease, it will easily pass on through the air handling unit system, right? So I would imagine that in the office, so it makes sense to shut it down. So you can imagine that if someone like if involved in the what do you call suffer from COVID, it can easily the droplet can easily pass through unless it's a hospital, they have a special HEPA filter and so on and so forth. And to me, that is the key thing that for architects, although we are not M&E engineer, but something to look at is actually, you know, as architect, we are actually responsible for the entire building. There's one typology, existing building that I'm quite, you know, I find that it's quite vulnerable it clearly show that it's very problematic. And in the shopping center, it's not much better. Although I mean, normally they have atrium here and there, but they are still, how should I say it? They are, um, you know, they are still like have things like elevator, lift, and everything seems to be like quite close. That's why when you enter a lift now, it's only allowed 4 person or whatever. Again, it's a compartmentalized space. It's a small space. So I think all this, it seems to me that, to me, it shows certain weakness. And then even I didn't mention here houses because I'm going to talk about that a bit later. Is that houses? It's generally, I would say, most of the houses in urban area at least, they are fully aircon. And air conditioning is the same thing. And then internal air quality, even without COVID, is like 2 to 5 times worse than the external air outside, right? So I think these are the things that we have to, in my view, as an architect, to advise the client or look at our living space in a closer manner. Is actually it doesn't. Our houses doesn't perform very well. Like terrace house, I would say without aircon, they will feel that it's so hot. So something wrong with the design that, or something in the design that we need to look at very carefully. Why can't it allow the you know the every house to like passively can operate within you know, without using the mechanical ventilation? And on a macro level, I think a more macro level or philosophical level, I think this a pandemic, it definitely challenged uh, the modern way of looking at our life. Like we always accept that, you know, where we work, our office should be different, should be quite a distance away from the house. But this is a very modern concept. Like olden day, like even the house that I grew up with, which is not a proper so-called proper shop house, but you sort of like, you know, you live upstairs and downstairs is your work. Is my father's shop, you know, kedai runcit or whatever. So it's like pretty much like working from home, except that yeah, it's like, but it's still a separation in terms of the function, right? But I would imagine that this is probably forced on us, and a lot of people have to work from home, like even until today, like with the MCO2 or MCO1. Now, that to me again, it has a lot of implication, which I might talk about it a bit later. Is that first off, is that, you know, are we going back to the, when you think when we have vaccine, that we go back to the old time, you know, olden day, that we have to stay close to where we work, right? Or can we afford to live a bit further off? And uh, the last point that I find that is actually quite interesting, that we actually, I know their condominium also, their high-end condominium, probably more space. And we're talking about, let's say, mid-range. Let's say, you know, you have like 900 3-bedroom or whatever. Generally, it's a very small space with a very small balcony outside. And during COVID, you actually cannot work outside. Although I mean, people being resilient, some of them actually go to the balcony and sing, or you know, try to be cheer the being a you know, um, try to sort of create some more cheerful environment, like, you know, like singing on the balcony, and then everyone in the condominium sort of um, like, you know, echo that sort of uh, uh, cheerfulness. But it's sort of like, if you look at it more closely, in a very close room, right? That no chance to going outside of your balcony. And then if you are even in a mid-range or upper range type of condominium, you have a shared like communal area like green or whatever, you can't go there because if you're, let's say you're on the 20th floor, you try to walk, the stairs, it's quite impossible to walk down to, let's say, third floor or something like that. Or you are on the higher floor, to use the lift is a no-no. In fact, you're pretty much like confined in your room. Then I feel that it is something that we have to look at. I think the stress of this typology, I think, is well tested. I think on people who live in, let's say, a more lower range type of what do you call condominium. Now the implication on architects, to me, I think the implication is actually quite wide ranging. And then I think just now I already mentioned, which I'm not going to repeat here, but it's that it actually, first thing is that it just show us, like to me, it's just another wake up call that how we should relate to our environment. It is actually something that can help us. It's so readily available, and a lot of time we take it for granted. I mean, fresh air and sunlight. And then you look at it in a wider issue, although I don't think there's enough evidence base to show, but a lot of scientists seems to link the easiness, the what do you call the easiness for this virus to occur from like transfer from animal to human is because of the climate change. A lot of things that make it easier, right? But having said that, there's probably a larger picture. But the immediate thing that we look at, obviously, to me, is actually is about something that we already have, like the way we deal with our immediate environment, the air, fresh air, and sunlight. And I put it in my title there. I use equatorial instead of tropical or tropics that we are talking about. But we know Equatoria, if we can just look at it a bit closer, it's actually a more accurate way of describing where Malaysia is. It's a sub-region. Tropic is like a very large band on the top, the what do you call Cancer, and then bottom, the Capricorn is very, very large. And what's interesting, later on I will explain, is that because sunlight is actually, to me, is the greatest gift when we are dealing with COVID. Because naturally, if you emitted sunlight into your house, sort of judiciously, right, it's actually a natural way, like a natural sanitizer that can clean your space instantly. Yeah, it might spoil, like the UV light might spoil your furniture or what have you, but it still is a natural thing, that a natural a phenomenon or natural element that can help you to keep the place healthy. Like and then vitamin D that quite difficult to produce artificially, but sunlight is a natural source of vitamin D. Then I would say that following up from the first point, I think then I think if we really appreciate what we have, actually it's almost like, yeah, I'm stating the obvious. But somehow you look at every house that we went to that's fully aircon and things like that. Obviously, we sort of like ignoring this point, like design with equatorial climate in mind. Which I mean is that we have to really look at the passive design, like getting our house to oriented the right way so that it's probably larger from north and south rather than east and west or whatever. But of course, it's probably a bit simplistic for me to say that. It's also depend on your localized condition. Let's say you have large trees and things like that facing west. So west might not be a bad place to face. But generally, east and what do you call the way we oriented the building, and then if we can emit the sunlight in a natural way, I think that helps a lot in our design. Now, the other things that I like to talk about is actually that I find that us being an architect practicing in the equatorial what do you call context, a lot of time we forget about the precedent of the Malay house, which I'm going to traditional Malay house, which I'm going to show a little bit later, is that it's the in-between space, in the interstitial space, like the 5-foot way or veranda way, or space in between building. And then like for example, that actually, let's say in the case of pandemic, and then some of you probably have listened to enough news, like in Europe, uh, when you are actually having a cup of coffee outside the cafe, you still can do that. And what it means is that you have a lot of social and economic implication. I mean, you don't have to fully lock down a restaurant. Like your patron can sit outside and have a drink, because obviously that on the outdoor environment, the transmission risk is much lower, although you still have to keep your social distancing and all that. So the interstitial space that we design it well, it have a level of comfort. Then it is like, you know, you don't need to aircon the place is one thing. I mean, you have a airflow and stuff like that. And I find that that is something that we need to look at, especially in the urban context, and plus even in houses as well. And just now I talked about this already, about the relook at housing typology, especially condominium and terrace house. And at this point, I want to just probably mention about terrace houses. Now, this pandemic uh, sort of like is a very what do you call, to me, a very drastic way of questioning us, right? And because I know we have to design if you are selling for masses, the houses tend to be very small. But you'll notice that all different councils, they have their own sizes. Like for example, you go to Seremban, certain majlis like Nilai, if you design what do you call terrace house, your car porch actually can come right up to the boundary. Whereas if you end up in Shah Alam, no, even in bungalow, your 20 feet setback or whatever, you have to be, even the roof cannot jutting inside. So a lot of this disparity or not a uniform way of looking at, or to me, it's quite arbitrary for each local council to impose different what do you call guideline, or what do you call the requirement. And to me, as architects, as a fraternity, I think maybe we should start a conversation to really relook at all these guidelines and make it more uniform. And then we would have like more how should I say it, what do you call a different way. Because if we can have, let's say the terrace house can what do you call, can increase in size, and then we can create an internal courtyard instead or whatever, or even start to a cluster house or different type of house type. It will give us more design parameter and introduce new thing to the to our what do you call, to our environment. And then I think this is probably the best opportunity to start this conversation. Like, why do you need to have semi-detached? Can't you have, like, you know, a cluster house or long house? And then maybe, yes, we probably, some of the council do allow that to happen. But what I'm trying to say is that we probably, as a fraternity, maybe we can start conversation and then maybe have it more uniform. So the designer and architects, probably we can look at it in a more what do you call it, in a more we can deal with it better, basically. And I think the next one is, because I was quite involved, like what Sarly was saying, architect Sarly is saying that, you know, in education, I think I would say that digital, which I might touch on a bit later as well, is that we really have to take advantage of this technology. I know it get used to, but this COVID sort of forced all the lecturer, regardless you are older generation or whatever, they have to know what is Google Drive to upload or whatever. But what to me more interesting thing is that, you know, as we said just now, I mentioned about working from home. I mean, it mean you actually, you know, like, rather than, you just imagine, like now, if let's say in Klang Valley, you just have to have, you have a unit in, let's say, Shah Alam or in Klang Valley area, maybe 1,000 square feet, it might cost you about 500,000 or 450,000 to get a unit. And then it's like a very congested space. But with this technology, I think it sort of cut down the distance, meaning you can live, if you still want to be close by to Selangor, you can always reach at the peripheral township, like in Broga, maybe in Lengang, or in other places that are very close to Selangor, right? And at that, but with the changing of state line, somehow the price of the land, you can afford a better land, build a small house there, and to me, indirectly, it will rejuvenate or reverse the trend of migration as well. Like the township, the smaller township, that become that dying, we might be able to rejuvenate that. But of course, I think you have to work with the government. Like now, government probably already realized that internet is have to be like a right to use, a utility, just like electricity and water. Like every Malaysian should be able to access that. So I think if that's being the point, I think this will bring about quite a different way of looking at all this peripheral town. I think you will sort of like introduce a lot of life to those area, and indirectly, I think the economy activity probably would be very interesting. And then knowing a lot of younger architects coming to our profession now, I think this will really a new playing ground. I believe for them. And this point here, the following point, is something that I don't quite like, but actually I do it myself, even though I don't quite like, because I somehow feel that it's quite inevitable, which I'm going to show in maybe one or two projects, right? It is about digital production. I mean, like building like the parts. It's yeah, can call it prefab, but I think it go further than that. I mean, it no longer we really cut down on the worker on site, meaning things are produced, manufactured off site, and then come there just reassemble. And I like it, and then I have this very ambivalent attitude towards it. And I really like to see some feedback or some what do you call, some thinking behind this. I will elaborate a bit later on that point. And lastly, again, I think if I were to summarize what impact that I feel the most important for me, right, and hopefully some of you, is that I think we some natural phenomenon like natural ventilation, sunlight, and things like that. Um, it become, I think, very crucial for us to relook at it and then really take that into consideration, like in our design, right? And then the next part that I'm going to share with are mainly picture and maybe some diagram, and talk about how I relook at the project that I'm doing. Some that I think it performed well, but maybe some I can improve. And well, you're welcome to give me a feedback after that, right? And then some of you might be familiar with the project as well. Now, before that is that following on that, the facts that equatorial climate. Now, this is a sun chart. The yellow patch there, I think most of the architects and architecture student would know. Now, this you notice it's only happened mainly in those what do you call country that which Malaysia is one of them, that in that imaginary line called equator. Right. So what it means is that 6 months we actually have 12 months of sunlight, but 6 months will be on the north. If like now the summer is in Australia, so our sunlight is actually coming from the south. And then you look at the band is rather shallow because it's quite what do you call, quite, it's like 60 to 70 degrees from the horizontal. What it means is that we can easily have what do you call, some roof to what do you call, prevent it from going in directly to the building, but enough to like introduce some sunlight into our building. So this is, I think, things that maybe as architect in Malaysia, we tend to take it for granted. And when especially we feel that we can aircon the building anytime, then then this might be totally not being considered. And I mentioned about the site and passive design, but site, I would like to say that is more like it's also not as straightforward as that. Like for example, west, although the western side is low inclination and generally people try to avoid that, but let's say the sunset is so beautiful and then you're facing the trees. How do you deal with that? So, but I will leave it to your imagination. What I'm trying to say is that the dynamic is more than just decided to put a wall against the west, right? Again, just to repeat myself, is actually the sunlight and natural ventilation that also become my preoccupation. Like having said that, a lot of time I was questioned by some of the students when I do some presentation, is that, oh, you design all this openable place, but does your client eventually also close the door and aircon the room? It's a very good question, right? So I try to handle that a bit later. But I still feel that this passage that I almost appear in all my talk is that it's by someone, a scholar very well known China. I mean, like back in like 1000, probably 1500 odd or 600 years ago, the Tang Dynasty. But a lot of also like Malaysian, we like to talk about feng shui and things like that. But this scholar is very well known. But those days, I think those scholars are quite amazing people. They are actually not just scholar writing poems. They are actually also administrator. They will measure, like for example, the flood line or whatever. And then this particular writer, his name is Po Chui. You can always look up. I think this passage is called translated. It's called the Record of Thatch Hall on Maulu. It's not a poem. It's actually a record of how he built this hut when he was like fall from grace. You know, he talked a bit too outspoken against the emperor. So, but this is where he actually obviously a very positive guy. Like he record this down, and then eventually this text, interesting enough, even though in Malaysia we have this Chinese stream in primary, but this passage never featured. I read it in English, and later on I got a Chinese copy or whatever. But this is in English one that I find that it's sort of like captured what I'm trying to say, like things that we take for granted, the natural phenomenon of equatorial, like we have sunlight from all over, natural ventilation or whatever. But of course, this is China. China is on the northern hemisphere, so all the what do you call the to warm up the house during winter, the house all have to face south. So there's a saying among the feng shui masters that you have to back to the north and face the south, and or face whatever animal, you know, the red pheasant or whatever, or the red phoenix or whatever. But that is a representation of south. But I thought it was very smart because the during those days the population, they are illiterate, so the emperor probably very smart to use an animal to represent a direction, right? So but in any case, if we just quickly read through the passage, he said, I put the door on the north side, right, to let the cool breeze so as to fan off the oppressive heat, right? So so as to fan off oppressive, made the southern rafter higher to admit the sunlight, right? You see, facing south, so he makes sure that the sunlight would come in case there should be the severe cold. It sounds so pragmatic and practical, right? But you see, this is 1,600 years ago, right? Like people don't have what do you call, maybe the study is not accurate like what we're having now. They don't have a sun chart or whatever, but maybe try and error, right? Then he said the beam was trimmed and left unpainted or whatever, but these are more like eventually it influenced a lot of Japanese. This passage like translated and a lot of Japanese poets like sort of write similar essay to like pay homage to this Po Chui, you know. But in a nutshell, I think this passage to me is sort of almost summarized, also reinforced after the pandemic my obsessiveness to eventually convince my client that they have to be mindful of this, that all houses should have this sort of character in their building, right? So I will go to the first house. That I'm not going to talk about the house so much, but more in relation to this thing that I'm talking about, the natural phenomenon or whatever. And this is a house actually very small, 8,000 square feet, and pretty much I have to use up the entire length. And I create a forecourt on one side, and actually then I increase what do you call, introduce a diagonal walk through the center there. But in a nutshell, I want to create a narrow walkway in between that, right? That actually would allow the sunlight to come in from the top. Now in our GBI, this is probably not a smart way because to allow direct natural sunlight coming in. But my take is that if I keep it small strip, and then like 11, 12 o'clock, at least I get the sunlight to come in. And my preoccupation, not so much to let the UV light clean the house. In some way it is, but more like actually so create a very a conducive internal space that I'm going to talk about later. And then I bridge it across with the what do you call, with bridges, and I have a family room sort of like hanging in the middle there, right? And this is the elevation. It shows that on one side you have a tall glass and the other side also have a tall glass, so that to create this natural cross ventilation across that diagonal space. So if I cut the section across here, you see the shaded area, pretty much the volume on the inside. And then the basic school physics, like for example, the hot air rises, right? You actually, the natural volume also will create a natural convection where the sunlight, you know, the what do you call, the air will move right through. And then the opening on the top of the glass, or the glass would create a air draft on the top. So this is how it looked like in a pretty much at midday, and the sun go right through. And at night, of course, it's a reverse. You can look at the stars. Um, then this is the ambience. Well, I mean, actually, to be honest with you, right? You actually, in terms of like material, this break with the recess in the joint is not really good for COVID, because it does gather dust. That's for sure. But hopefully, I think with this sunlight or whatever, then I'm thinking about it. Now, if I given the next chance, would I plaster the wall and actually what do you call just painted it white, so that it's actually the surface is probably better, easier to sanitize, it's easier to clean. But my feeling is that in many ways, although I mean now there's antivirus paint, I don't know how that works, but I still feel that to have that chemical inside the house, I still have I know now we don't have lead, but I still not quite convinced that there's a right way to go. But I still like the use of natural material. But here I think I probably reduce it a little bit by having a concrete sealer, so that the mold and things like that, fungus that won't grow, which is I think also sometimes we think that it's not very good for viruses. I just throw this picture at random because this is the builder that built the house. And if you want to say the impact of a pandemic, the more heart-wrenching for me is this guy. He passed away like about less than a week after the first lockdown, and then I can't even attend his funeral. But he just do a backstory is that, like, you know, maybe my practice, I know I do treat the contractor and I keep them as an arm's length. But this guy is quite different. He's a carpenter, very proud of his work. So he was a foreman when he was doing my other job, and then even come to my house, he did other job, but he set up on his own, right? And then he become whatever job I have, I'll get him to become one of the tenderer. But this is, I think, if you're talking about COVID and my way of practice, the impact, direct impact, is that I lost someone that I can trust a lot, and then the fact that I cannot attend the funeral is a bit of uh, an experience, you know, a very sad experience. But nevertheless, yeah, I just talk about this a bit, sidetrack a little bit. But again, then the sunlight, back to the sunlight, is coming through the house, and then it also give you, you know, I say it's a conducive type of environment when you have natural sunlight that can come through the space. Is that when the sun move, or there's an overcast sky, the clouds sort of flow past, you know, immediately on the inside, you sense the environment outside. So I think that I call the rhythm of the day, or the mood of the day, is immediately reflected inside. I think that's what I mean by that conducive is a very it's like the space within it is alive, because it relates exactly to the happening outside, mainly the sun, right? And then of course the wind that come through, and then you can see some of the lure here, which is full height, so that the air can move right through, right? So again, the air would induce upward to the space above. Hot air rises. And then this one thing that I think I did right is this floor that you notice here is in situ terrazzo. And COVID, actually, the material that they prefer is, of course, non-porous. But COVID is a bit very, what do you call, is a very hardy type of virus. And sometimes I thought that, you know, if let's say for kitchen surfaces, if we put stainless steel, it'll be good. But apparently, it's not good enough. I think that it can live on the even stainless steel surface like for 72 hours. So materiality, you know, that is quite hard to deal with. But in my case, I use terrazzo as well, but you still have to, then you have to sanitize it, right? And because the real good surface, in fact, is copper. But copper, if you want to use it, if it's so expensive, is one thing, and then it's not really, it's such malleable space that if you use for kitchen top, it just doesn't work. So I think it will pose some challenge for us, but nevertheless, I think to have a in situ terrazzo with minimum joint, let's say you have a marble floor which is porous and then with many joint, actually it's not very good for in a COVID type of situation. Now, this is what I mean by the volume of space. And again, what I like about this sort of space is that, you know, the sunlight coming in while you can be in a quite a shady area looking out for the sunlight. Even, yeah, you do midday, they sort of heat up the room a little bit on the center, but, you know, you always have place that where you can escape and then be, you know, enjoy the sunlight. And the second house I was talking about is probably more on the courtyard strategy that I employ in many of my house. And then this is probably one of them that I think it seems to, in the COVID, is quite successful. In fact, only yesterday, I just went there again because the client wanted to do something. This house has been completed for a while. Then you see when you have a situation like that, but a lot of the time, I think I attracted the client that actually already like to stay outdoor, maybe, right? So this is like, it's nothing new. I think all architects can do that. A courtyard at the center, and then I just, it has sort of like a splay a little bit because it follow the what do you call the geometry of the boundary. But on the elevation also, I try to open it up so that the air will move right through, you know. Then center there is basically open. Then I would say that also this is actually like what I mentioned briefly about the West. Like I could have easily put because it's facing west, and then it's almost like a junction there, you know. That I could have just put a wall there, but I decided not to because I feel that there's the openness, and then for them to participate on the, if you're sitting on the inside, that you can look out to the outside on the happening neighbor that pass by or what have you. So I decided to have a screen, and then still to allow the sunlight to come in, to basically, you know, sunlight. I find that it liven up the space, apart from the facts that we're talking about killing the germs or what have you. So on the inside, looking out, right, still quite transparent. And then I devise a certain type of a screen that is neither sort of a mix on the vertical and horizontal, but it's sort of like allowed certain transparency from the inside to the outside. So I think it seems to me it worked quite well, and it's a deliberate thing. And then this is the section that I came out to explain last time when I was trying to explain the scheme, is that um, because you see just now the screen is like out here, so the because with sunlight, the heat, you need to cut it from the outside, but I must say that it still heat up the screen here, and then you still get some heat along this the glass, the lower on the inside. But still, I think with the lower open, it acts very well. And then in fact, the top there, it's just like the other house 9 that I show you. My strategy is always open up the gap on the on top so that the hot air can escape. So I find that this natural ventilation, I'm glad to see that even yesterday, although he's sitting inside the kitchen, he would open up the entire wall. And then because it's designed as such that it can be a collapse, not say collapsible wall, it was a large sliding door that allowed them to push and then to allow the natural air to come right through, right? So this is where, when it is built, and then the air will move, what do you call, go right out there. And the other thing is maybe what I mentioned about prefab. I'm beginning to enjoy prefab and things like that when I do this house, is because I start to have, you know, do my own column, because I want to create some lightness and certain light fitting, and rather than, you know, the standard concrete frame with the brick infill and all that. And I sort of feel this is give me an idea a bit later when I design I'm going to show you the last house that I'm going to talk about in a short while. Is that, you know, it create this sort of lightness. And I think the lightness also allowed a lot of the times is that, like, you see the door that I can go like almost wall to wall, and then go back to the facts that this, when it's open up, the entire outside and inside is almost like merged into one, in terms of airflow, in terms of like walking out from the inside to the outside, you know. which you're going to see here. Like for example, you can walk, even I purposely level the deck from the inside to the outside. And I think this sort of space in COVID, even in a family situation, I think to me it seems to work quite well. And this is something that I would keep exploring in my view for my future work as well. And again, I think sunlight they're coming down. Again, it's not so much killing the germ or whatever, but it is, I think, it's the ambient and the atmosphere. And then to me, I call this equatorial, a characteristic of space that it's like from something very pragmatic, and then the space can be quite phenomenal, right? And the other thing that I always like to experiment is the stairs, because this is also where the hot air can rise. And then it's like when we design the vertical, when we walk up a transition space from down or one floor to another, if we can open it up as much as possible, is where you open a hole that allow the air to move right through. So again, it is also like, you can call it like a game that, we architect like to play, but I think that is a certain pragmatic um, uh, uh, substance behind it to me. And this is the almost an extension from the other house. And I show this house is that I feel that, a lot of bungalow that I designed, but good thing is that the client is still living there for a while. And then, the original brief that they gave me, and then the other question that I think some of the students throw to me when I did some presentation, which is quite true. What happened if like the lifestyle changed, all the children married off and stuff like that? But to me, if that happened, we have to accept that, either he sell it off or he do like what he's doing here in the next door house. Like, you have a very reduced lifestyle, like only the husband and wife staying there. And to me, this house, I have certain personal interest into it. Like, I find that it's more like a personal things that as architect, when we train up, we sort of like whether we like it or not, agree with it or not, like Farnsworth House by Miss Van der Rohe, the glass house and things like that, definitely influence our psyche a little bit. And then I think this one is like maybe consciously or otherwise, I like to create something very simple when they just want a very, very simple program to happen in that house. Practically downstairs is where he put his collected car or collectible car or whatever, and then he will live above. Right? The section actually show it's just a one room space. But this one, to me, is probably one of the a more COVID friendly space. And then this picture actually I take only yesterday. You'll notice that the tree has grown and all that. And then this is like a screen I make of a perforated metal sheets just to give them a further privacy from the neighbor, although I already have landscape to cover it from the outside. And this is the earlier picture. You can see the tree is a bit smaller, right? Again, I use landscape, like just now you saw, to actually, this again is just like the house next to it. The Heng house is Aliyah Pavilion, named after the wife. Is actually facing west. So instead of using the screen, I try to use the landscape. Then it's actually a very simple space. It's not big at all. So this one is like, you can see the scale. It's purposely small. And then like with a low space, actually the sun emission is only kept to only the peripheral. And when it open up, this is what my way of like make sure that the air move right through. And then when they have, this is a place also that they expect some gathering to happen. And when that happen, they can sit outside and then look at the view. And then the air basically move right through from below. And then you notice that track here, basically the what do you call, the doors, they are fully openable. It's another view. I think I'm running in this 7 minutes. I'll just quickly go through this. And this is a view from the golf course. And then it seems to work well. And then it's work well is when the worker that came to the site, you see where they gravitate, right? And then it worked probably, of course, with I think with the trees. And they prefer to sit on the outside than on the inside. And the last two jobs actually are related. One is Ting House, is that the point is like, I'm talking about automation and digital aspect that I think that is inevitable. And when I did this thing house is probably more than 10 years ago. And this is a longhand way because I start to, when I see the land, did the contour, and then I decided to have my first curve following the contour, and that I derive from a curvaceous shape, right? I'm not going to bore you with the concept, but talking about the shape. And to reproduce this shape is quite difficult. And this house, I do it in a long-handed way, meaning from the outside, because they are basically two roof, right? And just now I show the early picture is that pretty much the it's like longhand. I have to draw it myself and then tell them how long. And then I use AutoCAD and then sort of mix with hand drawn to arrive at that. So it's a very tedious way of working. And then when it come out, is that I have to get them to, you see this vertical to batten, the metal batten. I have to tell them exactly where the point is, and then they have to bend the thing, and then only when they connect all the segment, they know that this is an irregular central reach for the roof. And then of course when you know, you still have a lot of worker on site, which I like. And then all the timber, it's like, you know, it still you feel that it's crafted. This is the point that I have some reservation, and then the unhappiness. But with the house that I'm going to show you later in terms of production, right? This is, I still can see that it's crafted. You have people on site, they can amend things on the side. And then like this one, you know, only the central piece is in metal, but the rest is in timber. And like when it's finished, you know, the contrast between the things, it look quite to me is quite interesting. And then it is challenging because because when you have a geometry like that, actually no two rafter actually meet at the same point. So but this is quite tedious. Then if I then when it's finished, well, this is a thing of a past. I won't talk too much about that. Actually, I want to just allude to the last project that I'm going to show you. Is actually the Yuan house. Is that again? It's the larger curve. It's a much bigger house, right? And then because it's a house more like for the extended family rather than a single family. And the whole idea was that this is the my landscape plan is that I basically, because next to it is the forest reserve, and then I want the nature to sort of link in to the middle of the house. So when it's finished, you can see the tree here, sort of like if you are standing on the first floor or ground floor, it's sort of merging to the forest reserve, Bukit Raja Forest Reserve, to the what do you call, to the east of the building. Now again, this is the curve, right? So to produce this, I think now why it did relate to COVID is that I actually do this. Of course, I don't know COVID is coming or whatever, right? But this one, I feel that this like sort of pointer to me, right? That because COVID, the main thing that architects challenges for architects on site is that a lot of worker, and then now the problem is that, you know, one worker, or you have a cluster, what do you call, tested positive, and then, you know, everyone have to get tested, and then the cost involved and all that, it become very very problematic. So what it does is that, you know, if you have an automation, the main part, in fact, it was manufactured offsite, and then when you have on site, it's actually very limited people like sort of do the work, and that definitely will alleviate a lot of what do you call, the need, the contact, and therefore reduce the risk. Now this is the finished things that they do, right? And how this come about is actually I did the entire thing using the BIM is one thing, and then we and then I pass on to a factory, and then it so happened it's a younger group of people who run the factory, and they themselves very conversant. So every piece of this, like we have a huge file that they actually uh, uh, denote, then coded every piece of the wood here. Apart from the eave that is actually have the standard smaller piece, every piece of a rafter is different, right? But of course, it's nothing new. I mean, Zaha Hadid and a lot of them doing elsewhere. This is people have done before. But in the local context, I was surprised even for bungalow that we can achieve that. But that the when it comes to the site again, to do this is actually very very fast. up to this point. And then when you have almost like 2 or 3 worker that's on the top screwing away the bolt, not very many people worker on site. The entire assembly was quite fast, relatively fast for this part of the work, right? And then the other thing is that for complex, a relatively complex form, it is still quite fast. But I was I said the misgiving is that I don't see worker anymore. So it's like, on the one hand, I want to see worker, but then you have COVID. But this one, if you don't have COVID, then you can do something like that. But it looked like it's more mechanical. And of course, when it is done, I mean, probably nobody know the backstory of this house. But anyway, this is sharing among my peers. So I thought I share this idea. Then I'll quickly run through the images. Again, my thinking about the ventilation and then door that I can push to the side. And this is a super large window that to let the move right through. I think this sort of exploration I'm going to continue because I find COVID or otherwise, it seems to me that the COVID biggest message to us is like for us to reconnect back to nature and then really try to handle where we are, appreciate where we are, right? And then this is me standing there just to give you a sense of large opening that I really enjoy doing now, right? And then again, this is looking across to the dining. Again, these are the door that they can push right out. And then here you can see the in and out is pretty much merged into one. And okay, let's quickly go through that. And then if use more like high volume spaces, but I sort of like make sure that they are punctured through. There's no compartmentalized space, and then that sort of help. And then you notice that this roof also have double story, so it does like have a natural cross ventilation that for the what do you call, for the air to move right through 24/7. And this is again the inside outside space that I'm trying to show. And from the outside in, again, dining, you can walk out immediately, it's the deck. And I think it's this interstitial space that I think I'm continuing going to explore, which I feel a bit vindicated because of the COVID. Like, look like this is the way that we have to live and then look at the spaces that we design, be it a house, condominium, maybe should have a larger balcony, but of course, you have to fight with the developer to buy the idea or whatever. But I think this conversation, if they more forward thinking developer, I'm sure they will look at it and maybe break the outdoor space rather than for condominium, rather than on one single floor, maybe every 3 floor they should have one. So at least they can walk through the stairs to get a relief to get to the outdoor spaces. But I'm sure some of you have probably already thought about that. So this is the last few slides. But essentially, I want to show is that outside and inside, that it will be my key preoccupation. This is the last slide. And I would say out of this, the biggest impact for me in the pandemic, to me, is the wake-up call that we really have to go back and then really recognize where we are staying, where we are, and really make use of something that we think is so mundane, in Malaysia. But I think it's time to reappreciate our equatorial climate. Thank you. Back to you, Sarly.
Thank you, Architect Uy. As usual, an enlightening talk and very apt as well. I think, especially when you coin that phrase from ancient texts, which I think is prevalent all around the world. Architects around the world are now relearning from our vernacular. Here we are relearning a lot of things from our local vernacular, and it's everywhere around the world. I think
Yeah.
people are starting to remember back the old
Yes.
lessons.
Yes.
There are some questions. For those who want to ask questions, please do ask in the question tab. Some of you have asked in the chat. No, doesn't matter. I will relay the questions to Architect Woy. Ahmad Anas Anwar asked, I was thinking about biophilic design approaches for this pandemic. In your opinion, what are success factors for the application of the approach during COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's actually, biophilic. I think it become like in a lot of theses that, I mean, the student that we went through, but I think it's all depend on your interpretation. But if you are talking about reconnecting back to nature, I think that is the way to go. In my view, that's fantastic. But now I think newer generation, I think the way you substantiate an issue is actually can be very convincing and maybe more details, right?
Hmm.
Example would be like I would say like like I'm not convinced that, for example, you have a large slab on the roof. Like now, I think in Singapore, biophilic to them is that they want to green the entire roof of Singapore or whatever. But I would tend to think that we still have to refer back to nature. Like for example, a big example would be like Terengganu. Terengganu is very interesting. It is like a hosting the only species, 5 or 6 of species of chengao, right? Because of the natural mineral or soil composition, right? And then when you are, let's say, you are biophilic, is something very artificial, like a green wall, and you have like a 2 feet thing, you don't know where the nutrient come from and things like that. But I think you probably, if you go deeper to it, and then somehow actually tap into the natural aspect of it, I think it's a good way to go.
Yep. Okay, great. Architect Wan Sofia asks, natural environment, light and ventilation, and the sense of ground are basic rights to all living beings. Pandemic does not give impact on these needs, but rather give realization, rethinking on how much we have compromised. What do you think contributed to this? Economy, governance, or people's choices? How much can architecture fraternity change this?
Yeah, I think that is a billion-dollar question. So I should, but I think no, I think that you are right. I think I totally agree with Sophie on that, because it's a basic right. It's just that we somehow ignore it. But to me, I think to change that is very difficult. I think, okay, for us, like for example, maybe Sally, you younger, I still remember we grew up in the airconless space, right? Airconless space. We used to travel in an airconless car, right? So it wasn't in the culture then. Now, if you want to design a bungalow for any of houses, right, expecting them not to switch on the aircon, right? Or even the place where you pray, either a church or a masjid or whatever. It's like a status symbol. It's sort of so entrenched now. And when did it become entrenched, right? So I think this one, I think is a cultural change. And then the hardest to change is, in fact, is culture. And to me, what architect can do, like I think collectively, I think by guideline, by law and things like that, you can force it here and there. But I think it's like for us to really create space that works, that people enjoy, and then that hopefully is like, from one person to another, like it become a common factor. Like you go to somebody's house, oh, you still use aircon, ah? Oh, actually you don't need this.
Yeah.
If I got this thing, if you design like this, like this, like this. But of course, as a fraternity, probably we can come up with a guideline. But guideline is one thing. People still want to experience the place. If they experience the place, then they are convinced. Then probably there will be a new culture, or revert to the old culture that follow. Right.
True, very true. I think I definitely agree with you on the cultural changes because I think despite technological advances, if people don't use whatever technology that has been given or methodology that has been given, there's no point. And I think
Mm.
even in more developed nations, there is to use public transport, for example.
Yes.
It took celebrities and high ranking business people
Yeah.
taking public transport, then they change the culture. Say, hey, the CEO of the company also can ride in the subway.
Correct.
Why can't
Correct.
you?
Yeah.
Instead of the CEO
Yeah.
riding in a Bentley.
Yes. Yeah. I
Sure.
was told that actually IKEA's founder was like the richest man, and I know somebody that know him personally. He would travel in economy class to Malaysia,
Yeah.
and then when he go to place, he actually take Grab or taxi.
Yeah.
He don't have his own, like you imagine, like the big taiko, they be like bodyguard, everyone pick them up. But this apparently this guy, but it's from someone that know him personally. I spoke to.
I,
You're right, it's a culture. It's like what we feel that we are, where we are at. Yeah.
I think a lot of architects also is changing. I know a few people, including myself, we are trying to cycle to work, and sometimes
Oh,
your staff got luxury car, you naik bicycle.
Then you'll be a new trend. You want to know who is the boss, then you know who cycles to work.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting you mentioned the Spanish flu as well. I think
Yeah.
it's correct that it originated in America. It's got nothing to do with Spain,
Yeah.
and it's some actually the actual fact about it was I saw this documentary whereby um, it's just about propaganda at that time because it was World
Yes.
War One, and
Yes.
people did not want to show that people are dying because of this flu a lot in America,
Yes.
and in Europe, the only media that actually showed this gory death of this flu was the Spanish media. So they actually told the
I
truth, and
see.
and people said it was the Spanish flu, it was the Spanish flu, but it's actually not the Spanish flu.
Yes.
And the worst thing of all, in Spain itself,
Mm.
they actually called it the French flu.
But I tell
So
you, this
very
is we also
very
don't laugh at them because we see we actually we are the same, you know. Like when we say you look at the Malay culture itself, like when we what we call turkey, ayam belanda. We
yeah
haven't seen because something foreign we don't know. But
yeah
I actually last time when you talk about Spanish flu, I thought there might be some Donald Trump like character then, you know, and then probably doesn't like Spain, you know. That's why you name it. You won't call it COVID, you call it China flu, you know.
I'll be like I think it's what is always interesting about your talks, I guess it touches more on the human character um, of architecture, whereby I think your upbringing and your approach is very down to earth and human, and I think that is lacking in some of the more modern interpretations of architecture, whereby it's taken over by a lot of form making and it's by technology, and
I'm glad you picked that up. Yeah.
of course, of course. But my worry is, with all this work, Architect Wei, I think
Ah,
a lot of the things that you have shown is for a privileged few lah, who can actually afford these wonderful houses. But what about the
yeah.
masses? I mean, like
No, I think that's
everyday
a very
people.
good that's a very good question because actually you won't believe it because my master thesis is actually housing the urban poor in Peninsular Malaysia.
Okay,
But when
wow,
when
okay,
when I come back now, as we stand now, right, I just feel that I have no role there um, because it's like now it's very highly politicized. I mean, even when I come back, right, every 5 years we have this Malaysia plan, and then we simply crunch a number, and then now we just produce. It's a shelter, right? But my
mm,
research actually pointed to that we should look at housing as a verb, not as a noun. The housing, I mean, you just want to give people shelter, be it rent or whatever. Like now I find that it become like a house, become like a main burden for the people who own it to pay every month. Like take out a
yeah,
lot from the household income. And then, like you see, the most latest one, they even try to get a China contractor to build all the houses. They crunch a number, you know, they think the speed is so fast or whatever. So I feel that the entire thing is politicized and highly get out of hand. Like how many architects actually get involved in like those China produced contracting houses? You probably lock, stock, and barrel all but done by China, right? So what
true,
I'm trying to say is that it's not that I don't want to do that, but I feel that if I go into it, there's no role for me. There's no role. Like unless we go to the social housing or become like
yeah,
a social activist, which I even that I find that you ended up like seen as like a radical against the establishment or whatever, which I don't really care much. But actually we simply have no role. Like if I were, I would love if let's say you know, I know we have a few housing competition and all that, but I have different view about competition. I feel that we architects you know, there's a worse model for architects that you're producing work on your time, you pay for the competition, and then you know you the chances of you getting that is also sometimes, yeah, I'm not saying that the judgment is not fair or whatever, but it's just a bad model, right? Like somehow our skill is not appreciated. But to me, I feel that it's more like if I were to partner, let's say, with a local university or whatever, looking at a very specific place, I would do it free of charge, but we will get it built, right? Then I think that would be more fruitful, you know. And I still haven't got that chance, and I try to invest and do something, but I just not in the position to do that right now.
yeah. True. I think it's the reality of the
Mm.
industry. I think it's controlled by a lot by commercial realities,
Yeah.
and the developers are actually responding to demand,
Yeah.
market demand. And I
Yeah.
think I always like to think of it that way, that if market demand shifts so much into people are so sensitive in making their purchase decision based on good design and what they need, as opposed to just location,
Yes.
it's going to be a game changer for everybody. And
Yeah, but I tell you,
yeah,
that's why I mentioned about the rejuvenation of the peripheral. I find that actually now is the, if any possibility, is probably now, because the day I traveled to like Forest City to look at the Eco World thing. It's so close to Seremban, and then you cross the border, the land land price totally different,
yes,
and then I'm trying to say like it's about 45 minutes from KLCC. I mean, in a good day, right? And then to the airport also not that far, but it's just that like if we can. I think like taking soon and other, Ram Cool House talking about like no, not so much rural back to urban or whatever, but it's more like a realistic thing that you create a better environment, a more affordable, that the people can live there. And then I think it'll be very interesting to start with like almost like artist colony or architects colony. They just stay there, in 1 acre of land, a few people kongsi, and then start to build something there.
yeah,
It'll be
yeah.
it'll be interesting, I find.
They already have that planters heaven, but
But it's still, that one is still developer base,
base, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I think that there is hope. The clients also is changing, I believe.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
the I mean, like, if you were a first generation businessman that just got your company reach, doesn't matter like Malay, Chinese, or Indian.
yeah,
These people, when they build their houses, they have the money to
yeah,
build houses in gated communities. They tend to build to the maximum square footage.
yeah,
But it's the second generation, their children, who will take over the company, who is more educated, who has seen
yeah.
what living is all about, what quality of living is all about, that becomes the clients of the future. And these are the people that actually are creating the better buildings, not
Mm.
just the your single residentials, but I think the bigger developments as well.
Yeah, I think you're quite right, because the younger generation, some of them, they don't even feel the need to own something, you know, like the client that I deal with now, or I have now, is that they are the baby boomer or even earlier. They sort of like want to keep a legacy for the family.
Mm.
The idea is more legacy based. And recently, I came across a younger client. Like actually, he doesn't want. He probably want the house not to be seen, you know
Mm.
it's not like what you're saying, normally you have a land, you build it up. Like even in my bungalow, even with this Yuan house or whatever, I built much less, meaning I actually carve out the center for other to, for the landscape and stuff like that. But like what you said, I take that what you're saying about like, is a privileged group. It's very true. And then they all enjoy the house very much. In the COVID. I mean that it's not an issue there at all, But my point is that like to me is that when you what I tried to touch on was like the existing typology, like if you still have to build that like condominium and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of rethinking. Like you
True.
basically almost like want to break your outdoor space, like rather than one huge swimming pool, ageless or whatever, at one level which nobody can go during COVID, but maybe break it into parts.
True. It's it. I think that is the always the never ending debate, because I was told by one developer who's developing something in Bangsa,
Mm.
why would he spend so much time talking to the architect in designing something good, whereas if he just put in some garbage design, it will be sold out in next month. So
Yes.
that I
Actually, that is go to show that as architects, we have a lot of work to do,
yeah,
because they don't see the value in design. They don't see the value because they feel that location is everything. Like when you
mm,
buy a house, like you see the valuation on your property or whatever. Oh, where is it? Shah Alam, or is it Subang, or is it in
yeah, yeah,
Seremban, or is it whatever? Even cross border, the price drop. So it's not about the design of those houses. It's better. so somehow I think that perception got to change. How do we change it? I think maybe we should start a conversation as architects, because a lot of the time, like when they buy a land with a house on it, the house is dispensable. Like they buy, let's say, old house in, let's say, PJ or in this thing, unless they came across a good architects and see some value in all those houses, then they will do something interesting, right? So, but I think you are right. And then why I like, for example, you say that I don't. It's not that I don't do. I still have, like, I try to keep to my fees or whatever. But like you start to do mass housing, and then a lot of the time those dictate you. If not the marketing people, you'll be the feng shui master, right?
Yes.
So in fact, I'm going to start a chat on the clubhouse that I joined recently on that particular issue. It seems that we are controlled left, right, and center. The architect, we are almost like a glorified draftsman if you are not careful,
Yeah.
like I just want a French style and then I want to market it. Now, why does the French style coming from? You'll be surprised. Not even from the developer. It's from the marketing guy. They somehow they
Yes.
perceive that the French one, they call it Monet or whatever.
Mm-mm.
Then you say, oh, we can sell it well, right? Then it's still like we have this psychology of insufficiency in us, inadequacy, that we have to like get other people's thing, a
Mm-mm.
cheap copy, and then try to market it. You see?
I think that's why I think perhaps the best training in the university should be the ability to convince, yeah, to convince especially clients on
Mm. No, yeah,
what
that's
is
right.
good. Yeah.
I think you also now you're handling the master. I mean, I now with Sophie also with UPM. I think that the thesis, it is good in a sense that master thesis, they have to come out something on their own. Let me have to persuade people on your idea. Then if they
Mm.
can persuade your panelist, mentor or tutor or your lecturer, chances are when you come out like with a good idea, you'll be able to persuade your future client. There's something new, right? Like to me, I think COVID or this 1918 Spanish flu or whatever, I think humanity have this character about it. We always move from brink to brink. Like a lot of time look like end of the world already. But it's from there that we are by force or by no choice, we have to jump to the next level, right? And then
Yeah.
to me, this is that moment for us
True.
architects worldwide, and then I think in Malaysia as well. And
Definitely.
then I think like we can complain about uh like client don't listen to us or what have you, but if you look at my design, in fact, in terms of feng shui, quite a few of them doesn't comply at all in the traditional way, because they
Yes.
want you to build a box, right?
True.
So what I'm trying to say, you definitely need some sort of a persuasion skill, but to me it's not even persuasion. Like what I'm telling you is that, like, if we can show them that how that space is better space, you can tell the client and show them. And now with the SketchUp, with Lumion or whatever, you can show them exactly what time of the day that feel like
Mm.
the eastern sunlight sort of just came into the kitchen a little bit, not hot enough, but you can see the sunlight there with the plant there when you're having your breakfast, and then I was talking to my former student, now quite a successful architect, Kian, in
Mm-mm.
the
Yeah.
clubhouse chat. And then he mentioned something which is very interesting, like the kitchen during MCO, the client additional brief was to make the kitchen a bit bigger so that the everyone can have a meal together. Of all things, I think the parents have to spend more time with the children, right? It's no longer just cooking. And then even the father probably learn to cook as well.
Yes.
So they are probably the positive side after all.
Yes.
Otherwise, for most Malaysian, in the time when they are growing up, I have quite a few clients telling me that as well. That they said, it's like a make up the lost time, because when they are fighting for, I'm not saying fighting for life, to earn a lot of money. Normally, when they go to work, it's very early in the morning. The baby not yet wake up. Then by the time they came back very late. The baby already sleep, and this go on for years and years. They never see how the babies grow.
True.
Somehow, this COVID it sort of stopped the clock for 1 year. So now you see your children, right? So it's sort of good in a sense. So
Yes.
a lot of them start to enjoy the wife's food. Some even pick up cooking, and you are talking about all those people that start living in this luxury house that you're talking about. But I'm glad at least the whole family relationship sort of like rejig a little bit, right?
a recent survey done by was it Bernama or some organization shows that during this pandemic MCO,
Mm.
36% of Malaysian has lost weight. That means
36.
yes, that means they have gotten a healthier lifestyle
Oh,
during this pandemic, regardless of the the actual COVID virus. So
obviously not me.
for those who are unaware, Architect Wui also does a very good char kway teow.
Yeah. So we have what, another 5 minutes to chat if there's any question, but look like
Yes,
there's not much of a question, which is
yes,
fine with me as well.
yeah.
Because I think there are like how many sessions going parallel? 48 or something?
I think that's 12 if I've,
Oh,
let me check
okay.
because there are I think 8 rooms going on at once.
I see. I see.
So that's where the logistic problem comes in.
Yeah, yeah,
Where
yeah. And I thought that was very ambitious. Yesterday, when they briefing, I thought I was in the wrong room. No, the day before.
yeah.
So many speakers.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's always a pleasure to talk to you and to exchange these ideas. I really enjoyed the plans that you showed because I've seen a lot of students, especially in the lower years, refer to your projects. The first two fan type of plan, right?
uh-huh.
All curvilinear and whatnot, and they produce a similar plan,
Uh-huh.
but the end result is totally different. And I think that is where sensitivity in detailing and understanding 3D is very actual space is important rather than just looking at the plan.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's always a pleasure to talk to the student. But one thing that I miss in like real life, because you see communication, I think actually the real communication actually is normally 40% that you don't see. Gesture,
True, true.
looking at the interaction and stuff like that, which you can't have it on the internet, which I think, but still I think I'm grateful that we have this internet. Otherwise, I tell you, there's so many problems with teaching and with all that. Yeah. So do you all face the same thing as well, is it? In
I
UM?
think for UM, currently we are all going into online. Even
Yeah.
the next semester, everything is online. Some universities they have adopted a hybrid method,
Right.
and Lembaga also has come up with some policy lah with regard to hybrid and whatnot. So they actually leaving it up to the university. But
Mm.
but for UM, actually the Architect Way, the most challenging
Yeah.
to teach is the first year because
No, it's true.
they
It's
just
true.
came in,
Yeah.
and
They totally have no concept. Yeah.
you need to teach them the basics of like drawing and like lines and whatnot
Yeah.
virtually, which is a
I
very
I don't know
challenge.
how you all do it. I just came back from UKM the 2 days ago. Not came back, but on the Zoom, right? Yeah, because you cannot meet the student. I think that's the part that is challenging part for architects. But interesting enough, I think Zoom session or whatever somehow it get the student to be more focused as well.
Sure.
Like some of the work, in fact, I find that is more is better in a way, than actually. But I still cannot fathom how they imagine the site, right? How do you get them to imagine the site? The air that moves right through, or whether it's hot, or when you walk up, and how does it feel, what the environmental is like. Yeah, but that's
I
good.
think I think there's some universities have resorted to Google Maps, but I think a bit of the physical exploration is lost. It's not the same. It's not the same. If you say even uh, I always tell the students like what Architect Wei,
Ah.
it's like going on a date with a beautiful woman and actually seeing the beautiful woman's picture on your monitor. It's different.
Such torture.
Not the same. That's how you perceive space, right? Being there is
Yes,
different.
yes. That's why I find that a lot of the time, even for me now, when I go into a space, right? I think the physicality of it that we cannot avoid. Like you must know,
True.
oh, this space is nice. Oh, really? How high it is? Is it 2.4? 2.8? Or whatever. So I think you have to be physically there to feel that and to understand that. you know.
And I think even though your pictures are very nice, I'm sure it all involves the five senses. I mean, like listening to the wind in the trees and smelling the greens, all help to accentuate the feeling in the spaces that you have created. Because I remember some of your houses uh, the kitchens are very open. You can smell people
It is.
cooking and all those
Yeah.
kind of interactions that
Yeah.
is lost virtually. I think
Yeah, yeah,
if
you're
if you
absolutely right. Certain space is actually what hits you is not so much the your experience first; it's a smell, you know,
uh,
and it's so important. And yeah, so I think it's good. I think we're about to finish. If there's no other question, I'm okay to retire now.
okay.
One meeting off, yeah.
No problem.
Uh,
I'm happy to chat with you.
uh,
Uh, I'm checking the questions for a final time. No questions. Thank you so much, Architect Wu. Always a pleasure to have you and to have you talk about all these very pertinent
mm,
and also important topics that affect us all actually.
mm.
And I think it's not a reflection that there's no much question. I think it's also the slot because it's an afternoon slot, which
After this,
is very challenging.
but
After
there's one
lunch.
thing. But to be honest with you, when I actually think about it, actually, before when I present, I said, actually, it's a very mundane. It's a very mundane thing that when I was a student, also, actually, I don't like to hear so much. Like you're talking about sunlight, ventilation is so important or whatever. We all know that it's actually you don't even need to know. It's just like you try to explain to the fish how important is water.
Yeah.
You're in it, so I think somehow you have to take the fish outside of the water, but I still
Surely.
don't know how to do it. Like outside of the water, then you know how important it is. And then I still remember the Australian architect, so my friend, he's actually came to my house back in 2005. I mean, when we have datum, so my
Right.
house, they use it as a place where you entertain all those speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy is called Peter Stutchbury. I think, don't know whether you remember or not. Long
Right.
hair.
Right. Yes.
So
Yes.
he came to me, and then he was telling me, he said, uh, what I'm fighting for? He said when he fighting for in architecture in Australia and things like that,
Yeah.
is to get people to understand the facts that air, rain, or whatever those natural phenomenon are phenomenal. You don't need anything else. They are not mundane. And then I say a lot of time people cannot relate to it. People really want to listen to something like deeper or something like that. But I say if you know how to handle this basic element, that the result is phenomenal. That's what he said. Which I think that the more I think about it, I think there's certain truth in it.
True. I think that is an avenue for another discussion on theory and
Yes.
phenomenology. But all the time that we have today is finished. So
Yep.
thank you again, Architect
Okay.
Wei.
Thanks for moderating.
Definitely it's my pleasure. We'll have don't forget there's another for those who are attending. There is another session coming up in 30 minutes. So please get your correct room. And with that, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Architect Wei. Stay safe. See you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Architect
you.
Sari. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.